Imagine a civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that 4,500 years ago they had better plumbing than most of Europe would have until the 20th century. A society where every home had a bathroom, where city planning rivaled modern urban design, and where equality seemed built into the very foundations of their cities. This isn't science fiction. This is the Indus Valley Civilization, and it's time America learned their story. It's 1922. While Americans are dancing to jazz and watching the first commercial radio broadcasts, halfway around the world, an Indian archaeologist named R.D. Banerjee is about to stumble upon one of history's greatest mysteries. Banerjee wasn't looking for glory. He was surveying a Buddhist stupa, a religious monument in a place called Mohenjo-daro in what's now Pakistan. But beneath the Buddhist ruins, he found something that didn't make sense. Bricks. Thousands upon thousands of standardized bricks laid out in a grid pattern that looked modern. The same year, 400 miles away, another archaeologist named John Marshall was excavating a site called Harappa. What they'd both found would rewrite history books. These weren't just old ruins. This was evidence of an entire civilization, one that had been lost to history for millennia. Think about this scale for a moment. The Indus Valley Civilization covered an area larger than Western Europe, nearly 500,000 square miles. That's bigger than Texas and California combined. At its peak, around 2500 BCE, it was home to an estimated 5 million people. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the population of modern-day Colorado, all living without any of the technology we take for granted today. While the Egyptians were building pyramids for their pharaohs, and the Mesopotamians were writing epic poems about their kings, the Indus people were doing something radically different. They were building cities for everyone. Let me take you on a walk in Mohenjo-daro on a typical morning, circa 2500 BCE. You're standing on a street that's exactly 9 feet wide. Not 8, not 10, but 9. Look down any street in the city and you'll find the same measurement. The Indus people had figured out standardization 4,500 years ago. The streets form a perfect grid, running north-south and east-west, like an ancient Manhattan. But here's where it gets interesting. Every single house, from the largest to the smallest, has access to the same civic amenities. We're talking about indoor plumbing, folks, in 2500 BCE. Picture a typical home. You walk in through a narrow entrance, positioned so nobody walking by can see directly into your house, giving you privacy. Inside, there's a central courtyard for light and air. Rooms are arranged around it. And here's the kicker. You've got a bathroom with a toilet connected to a sophisticated sewage system. These weren't primitive drains. These were engineered systems. Covered drains ran beneath the streets, sloped for proper drainage. They had inspection holes so workers could clean them. Settling chambers to filter out solid waste. Some homes even had septic tanks. Ancient Rome, often praised for its engineering, wouldn't achieve anything close to this for another 2,000 years. And then there's the Great Bath. Imagine a swimming pool, roughly 40 feet long and 23 feet wide, sunk into the ground. But this wasn't for recreation. This was sacred space. The bath was waterproofed with bitumen, the same stuff we use to pave roads today. Fresh water flowed in through one system, used water drained out through another. The engineering is so precise that when archaeologists excavated it in the 1920s, it was still watertight after 4,000 years. But what really blows my mind, and should blow yours too, is what's missing from these cities. Look at any ancient civilization, and what do you find at the center? A palace, a temple, a monument to a king or god. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats dominated the skyline. In Egypt, pyramids and temples to pharaohs. In China, imperial palaces. In the Indus cities, nothing. No palaces, no temples we can definitively identify. No massive statues of rulers. The largest buildings? Public granaries and the Great Bath. Buildings for the community, not for glorifying individuals. What we're seeing in the Indus Valley challenges every assumption we have about how ancient civilizations organized themselves. We're trained to look for hierarchy, for inequality, for the rulers and the ruled. But the Indus cities keep telling us a different story, one of remarkable social equality.
Now, here's where our story takes a frustrating turn. The Indus people left us something. Thousands of small stone seals, terracotta tablets, pottery shards, all covered in writing. Beautiful, intricate symbols, and we can't read a single word. This isn't like Egyptian hieroglyphics, where we found the Rosetta Stone, a key to unlock the code. The Indus script stands alone, defiant, refusing to give up its secrets despite nearly a century of attempts to crack it. We've identified around 400 different symbols. Most messages are short, just 5 symbols on average. Some scholars think it's a full writing system. Others argue it might be more like a symbolic system, like modern road signs. The debate gets heated at academic conferences, believe me. But even without reading their words, these seals tell us stories. Look at this one, a unicorn-like creature. This image appears on thousands of seals across the civilization, from the coast to inland cities. That suggests either trade networks or shared cultural identity spanning vast distances. Here's a figure seated in what looks like a yoga pose, surrounded by animals. Some scholars see an early version of the Hindu god Shiva. Others caution against reading too much into it. The truth? We just don't know. But here's what we do know. Indus seals have been found in Mesopotamia, in modern-day Iraq. Mesopotamian artifacts have been found in Indus cities. These people were trading across thousands of miles of ocean and desert 4,500 years ago. Every few years, someone claims they've cracked the Indus script. It makes headlines, and every time the academic community examines the evidence and finds it doesn't hold up. The frustrating truth is, without a bilingual text or some major breakthrough, we may never read their words. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because we can't read their writing doesn't mean they weren't literate or sophisticated. Let's talk about something Americans understand deeply: commerce. The Indus people were master traders and craftspeople, but their economy looked radically different from what we're used to. Remember those standardized bricks I mentioned? That standardization extended to everything. Weights and measures were uniform across the entire civilization. Find a weight in a city on the coast, find one in a city 500 miles inland. They're identical. This is regulatory oversight on a massive scale. The Indus people were producing goods that would make any modern designer jealous. carnelian beads in vibrant red, some no bigger than a pinhead, shell bangles, copper tools, bronze weapons, pottery with geometric designs so precise they look machine-made. Their traders were traveling to Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, a journey of over 1,500 miles. Think about that. No GPS, no weather forecasts, no Coast Guard, just the stars, experience, and courage. And they were making this journey regularly enough that Mesopotamian texts mention Meluha, their name for the Indus region. We found Indus seals in the royal tombs of Mesopotamia. That's like finding an American dollar in an ancient Chinese emperor's grave. It tells us these weren't random encounters. This was established, valued trade. At a place called Lothal, archaeologists found something remarkable: a dockyard, an engineered harbor with channels and locks to control water levels. The Indus people were building maritime infrastructure that wouldn't look out of place in a modern port. What fascinates me about the Indus economy is what appears to be relative wealth distribution. We don't see massive hoards of wealth in some houses and poverty in others. Even modest homes have quality goods. This suggests either a robust middle class or some form of wealth redistribution. Either way, it's economically sophisticated in ways we're still trying to understand. Here's where the Indus Valley Civilization gets really interesting and really confusing for historians. Because what we don't find tells us as much as what we do. In Egypt, we find massive wealth inequality. Pharaohs buried with gold, jewels, and everything they'd need in the afterlife. Common people buried with almost nothing. In Mesopotamia, king lists, palace records, monuments to rulers. In China, oracle bones asking ancestors to bless the emperor. In the Indus Valley, graves are remarkably uniform. Some people buried with a few pots, some jewelry, but no one buried with massive wealth. No elaborate tombs, no pyramids or monuments. The richest grave we've found would be considered middle class by ancient standards. No palaces, no throne rooms, no royal iconography, no portraits of kings, no inscriptions praising rulers, nothing. For archaeologists trained to find hierarchy in ancient societies, this is profoundly unsettling. There's this one artifact that's become iconic, the so-called priest king sculpture. It's a small stone bust of a bearded man wearing a handband with a circular ornament. He's wearing a robe decorated with trefoil patterns. He looks important, regal even. So archaeologists called him the priest king. But here's the thing. We have absolutely no evidence he was a priest or a king. We just assumed he must be because that's what we expect from ancient civilizations. But maybe he was just a well-dressed citizen. Maybe the Indus people carved images of regular people, not just rulers. The Indus Valley challenges our assumptions about power and social organization. We assume complex civilizations require strong central authority, a king, an emperor, a pharaoh. But what if they governed differently? What if they had a more distributed form of authority? Councils, assemblies, community decision-making. We might not recognize it in the archaeological record because we're not looking for it. Some scholars think the Indus cities might have been governed by merchant councils or religious authorities who left no monuments to themselves. Others suggest each city might have been independent, connected by trade and shared culture, but not by a single ruler. Think of it like the ancient equivalent of the European Union, shared standards and values without a single supreme authority. The urban planning supports this. Houses of similar sizes, equal access to amenities,
No palatial district versus slums. If there were kings, they were kings who didn't distinguish themselves architecturally from their people, which, let's be honest, would make them pretty unique in the history of monarchy. Let's bring these people to life, because they weren't just builders and traders. They were humans. They loved, laughed, played, worked, and dreamed, just like we do. Indus children played with toys. We found small terracotta carts with wheels that actually turn, whistles shaped like birds, animal figurines. Some things don't change. Kids have always loved toys that move and make noise. Adults wore jewelry, lots of it. Beaded necklaces, copper bangles, shell bracelets. Both men and women wore jewelry, suggesting a culture that valued personal adornment for everyone, not just the elite. They combed their hair. We found ivory combs. They looked in mirrors, polished copper ones. They ground cosmetics on stone palettes. They cared about how they looked. They wore cotton. In fact, they were probably the first people in the world to cultivate cotton for cloth. Think about that. While other civilizations were wearing wool and linen, the Indus people were wearing cotton, which in ancient times would have been the height of luxury and comfort. They ate wheat and barley, lentils and peas. They raised cattle, sheep and goats. They fished and hunted. Archaeological evidence suggests they might have eaten chicken. Some of the earliest evidence of chicken domestication comes from the Indus Valley. They played games. We found game boards carved into stone, with rules we can only guess at. Some look remarkably similar to modern board games from South Asia. Were these early versions of chess or pachisi? We'll probably never know, but we know they played. They created art, not just utilitarian objects, but beautiful things. Pottery painted with geometric designs and natural motifs. Tiny seals carved with incredible detail. A bronze dancing girl, her pose so naturalistic you can practically see her moving. The dancing girl sculpture is only about 4 inches tall, but she captures something essential about Indus culture. She's confident. She's adorned with jewelry, but she's not wealthy. She's wearing bangles, but she's naked. She's not formal or stiff like much ancient art. She's natural, casual, even cheeky. That tells us something about how these people saw themselves and their world. Look at her stance. One hand on her hip, head tilted. She looks like she could be a teenager today. That's 4,500 years of human nature captured in bronze.
Around 1900 BCE, something happened. The great Indus cities began to decline. Streets weren't repaired. Buildings crumbled. The standardized brick production stopped. Within a few centuries, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were abandoned. The Indus Valley Civilization, which had thrived for nearly 1,000 years, disappeared. But here's the mystery. We don't know why. And that's driven archaeologists crazy for a century. The early theory was invasion. British archaeologists in the 1940s, influenced by their own colonial context, theorized that Indo-Aryan invaders swept in from the north, destroying the cities. They even found skeletons in Mohenjo-daro and claimed they were massacre victims. It fit a convenient narrative: advanced civilization destroyed by barbarian hordes. But modern analysis tells a different story. Those skeletons, they're from different time periods, spanning centuries. They weren't massacre victims, they were just people who died at different times. There's no evidence of mass violence, no burned cities, no signs of warfare. The next theory, climate change.
And no, I'm not talking about modern climate change. I'm talking about natural climate shifts 4,000 years ago. Geological and archaeological evidence suggests the monsoon patterns that fed the Indus civilization shifted. The rivers changed course. Rainfall decreased. Suddenly, the agricultural surplus that supported those cities evaporated. We can see in the geological record that around 2000 BCE, the Indian monsoon system weakened significantly. This wasn't a drought that lasted a few years. This was a climate shift that lasted centuries. Rivers dried up or changed course. Agricultural yields would have plummeted. Cities that depended on food surplus couldn't sustain their populations. The Ghaggar-Hakra river system, which many scholars believe is the Saraswati River mentioned in ancient Hindu texts, appears to have dried up around this time. If major rivers are disappearing, your cities are in trouble. So the collapse might not have been dramatic. No explosions, no battles, no apocalypse, just a slow decline. Harvests getting smaller each year, cities becoming harder to sustain, people gradually moving away, seeking better conditions, the cities slowly emptying until only ruins remained. Some scholars think the Indus people migrated eastward and southward, becoming part of the developing Vedic culture that would eventually evolve into classical Indian civilization. Their knowledge of urban planning, their crafts, their agricultural practices, all folding into a new cultural synthesis. Others point to evidence of continued occupation in some areas, just at a much reduced scale. Maybe the civilization didn't collapse, maybe it transformed. Maybe the great cities fell, but the people adapted, survived, and continued in different forms. If you made it this far, you're clearly a history lover like me. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next documentary. What lost civilization should we explore next? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.